Welcome back. The three plays which are included in your reading for this time are often grouped together under the name of Oresteia. They're named after Orestes, who's the son of Agamemnon, and who has the leading part in the last two plays. These three plays were written by Aeschylus, the earliest of the Greek tragedians whose plays have survived. But the story of Agamemnon's death and the revenge which his son Orestes took with the help of his sister Electra fascinated the other tragedians also. Sophocles, who we'll read later on, wrote a play called Electra, while from Euripides' hand there survives another Electra, as well as an Orestes. Euripides also wrote two plays dealing with the fate of Iphigenia, the sister of Orestes and Electra. And we'll talk a little bit more about this so you can see where all of these names fit in the genealogy. So only 7 of Aeschylus's plays survive out of a total of more than 90. He won prizes for his plays at least 12 times, and Aeschylus reached maturity during the Golden Age of Athens, after the defeat of the Persians and before the Peloponnesian War toppled Athens from her place of power and glory. Now we're going to read about the Peloponnesian War when we read Thucydides. Aeschylus himself fought in these wars, and he actually did not fight in the Peloponnesian War, but he fought in the Persian Wars, and he fought at the decisive Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. And we're going to read a little bit more about that battle when we read Herodotus, the historian. So, the fascination of men of all ages with the Trojan War and with the Homeric heroes is apparently inexhaustible. The events of the war and the men who participated in it are familiar to all of us. And if they're not yet familiar to you, they will be by the end of this year. And you'll recognize that a lot of things that we have in our world, especially our nation, our Western hemisphere, has words from the Greeks. For instance, 2 of them, I'll talk about right now. So the word Homeric is actually, it's an adjective that is still used to designate something grand. Let's say that you are charged with the responsibility to put together an incredibly huge event. Let's say 20,000 people are coming to it and you are in charge of it. And you delegate to many, many people that are under you, and you pull it off. And I would probably describe you as Homeric. Okay, you've done something very grand. The other word you'll hear a lot is Odyssey. And that's basically a long, drawn-out journey in quest of something, just like Odysseus. He took 10 years in the quest of his wife. He wanted to go back to his wife and his family. And maybe you could say that if you're a fanatic about family history and you're constantly working on it, searching, traveling all over, looking for facts and vital records of your family, you could say that you have been on an odyssey your whole life to find your family records. So, these poems and the people that we meet in them are really not going to be a rediscovery of recent ages. They have always been a basic part of mythology and the culture of our Western world. So even though you're discovering them now, it's not a rediscovery. It has actually always been a part of us. In Aeschylus's time, there was no subject considered more fit for tragedy than the Trojan War and the men who fought in it. And the conflict was actually supposed to right a wrong. There was an abduction of a beautiful woman married to Menelaus. Excuse me. This picture on the top right is a depiction of Prince Paris, who is from from Troy, and he comes all the way down to Sparta, knows how beautiful Helen is, and he abducts her. He takes her away in his boat, and they sail to Troy. So you can see in the map down below, the far left, the bottom left is Sparta, and you follow that arrow all the way up to Troy, and that was the trip that Paris did, and took Helen back up to his kingdom. It was actually the kingdom of his father, whose name is King Priam, and he was not very happy with Paris. Very unhappy with Paris. Now Menelaus, who is Helen's husband, who lives in Sparta, he and his brother Agamemnon begin to declare war on Paris and on Troy. And so they go there, and after 10 years they win. So the Greeks win, and they're able to bring Helen back, and they're happily married and living life when Telemachus, and we know Telemachus is he's a fictional figure, possibly. But anyway, he goes and he visits Helen and Menelaus, and he learns to grow up with them. They teach him many things to help him on his journey to find his father and to save his mother from all of those suitors. So that gives you a little bit of background there. And but there's this primitive justice that's going on here. There's really no rules about whether you can declare war on someone or not. There's just nothing stopping him. So they have this primitive justice, which is in the absence of any legal machinery. So there's no legal machinery there. There's no law. And he and Agamemnon wage war with many of the great men back there. Odysseus is one of them. Achilles is another one. And so the question is, we've got to think about who is right. Is it right that he go and save his wife? Is it right that he declare war on Troy to bring her back? Okay. But there's some major problems after the war. Major problems, and we can call them dark curses. We see that, number one, Agamemnon, first of all, before he even goes to the war, he has sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia to the gods so that they can have successful sailing. And they do. They get to Troy, they fight for 10 long years, and they come back. Number two is Clytemnestra. This is Agamemnon's wife, is pretty upset about losing her daughter. And number three, big problem, the war lasts 10 years. Clytemnestra has been alone. She is unfaithful to her husband after 10 long years. And she loves Aegisthus, who actually has seduced her. So you see a little difference between her, Clytemnestra, and I can't think of Odysseus's wife, Penelope. You see that she was very faithful, but Clytemnestra is unfaithful to her husband. Number four, Clytemnestra is furious with her husband when he comes home from the war. He's prideful. She doesn't love him anymore, and he killed their daughter. And number five, Clytemnestra has her husband murdered by Aegisthus, her lover. And then number six, Orestes, who is Clytemnestra and Agamemnon's son, he avenges the murder of his father and murders his mother. And of course, he murders Aegisthus as well. So, really, we've got some questions here we've got to ask. But let's go to this genealogy really quickly so you can see how all the names fit together. So you've got Tantalus at the top, who's the great-grandfather of Agamemnon, and Pelops is his son. And Pelops has two sons. You follow those lines, and he's got Atreus and Thyestes as his sons. And then on the left-hand side, Atreus has three sons, Menelaus, Agamemnon, and Pleisthenes. And if you follow Agamemnon, you see that he has three children, Orestes, Electra, and Iphigenia. Now, do you remember Agamemnon sacrifices Iphigenia so that he can have safe sailing, protected sailing back to Troy to go get Menelaus' wife Helen? Well, they come home and let's put the two wives' names on there. Menelaus is married to Helen, and Agamemnon is married to Clytemnestra. And we just talked about how Clytemnestra is pretty upset because she has fallen in love with, look over on the right-hand side, Thyestes' son Aegisthus. Okay? Aegisthus has seduced Clytemnestra. They are now lovers. Clytemnestra doesn't like Agamemnon anymore. He killed her daughter. She's got a lot of problems there, and so she kills Agamemnon. She has Aegisthus kill him. And then Orestes, her son, you see, he has help from his sister Electra. And eventually they kill Aegisthus and Clytemnestra. So you've got quite a few interesting problems here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Thyestes in a few minutes. You see under Thyestes he's got Aegisthus as a son, and then he has other children who Atreus kills. Other children killed by Atreus and served to Thyestes as a meal. Pretty bloodthirsty, pretty gross stuff here. But remember, we don't put our ideas and thoughts onto them. We look at their culture as who they are, and then we can compare it to ours. If we put our rules and light knowledge upon them, we're not going to look at them in the right manner. We have to take what their culture was and understand it for what it was then, and then we can bring it back up to ours and say, whoa, we have a lot more light knowledge. We have some better, we've made some better decisions about how to take care of our parents and our children, right? So here we have the two sisters, Clytemnestra and Helen. Those two sisters married the two brothers, Agamemnon and Menelaus. And each of them are central to the legal question of right and wrong. We look at Helen on the right. She was abducted. Is it right that Agamemnon and Menelaus declare war on Troy to bring her back? Is that right, or is it wrong? Then you look at Clytemnestra. She kills her husband because he killed, well, maybe a pretext because he killed their daughter to sacrifice to the gods. Is it right that she kills him, or is it right that she has him killed? Who is right, asked the poet. But he is only repeating a question that must have been asked ever since the story of the Trojan War and Agamemnon has been told. So the questions are, was Agamemnon right, who sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia in order that the Achaean fleet might sail on its errand of vengeance against Troy? Was Clytemnestra right, who revenged her daughter by killing Agamemnon? Or was Iphigenia's death merely a pretext for Clytemnestra to excuse the murder of Agamemnon? Was Orestes, the son of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, justified in killing his mother to revenge his father? You got to realize that there's a lot of passions and moral indignation that's running high in these plays. There's a lot of bloodshed. Through them all runs the dark curse that haunts Agamemnon and all his forebears and descendants, a curse that makes parents and children die by each other's swords. The question is, what is the solution to this dark curse over parents and children in all three plays? Well, the goddess Athena finally is able to break the curse, and the solution lies in the institution, which is the subject of our discussion and our reading. And the solution is law. Now, my question to you is let's look at law and law breaking, and what are their roles? And it's best understood if we summarize the events of the three plays, okay? So, the events of the three plays, let me get to the right page here. Okay. The genealogy of the house of Atreus begins with Tantalus. Do you remember that? Let me go back to that and see if I can find it there. So as we look at that, we can see the same people here that we talked about earlier. So he was a descendant of Zeus, and therefore almost a god himself. Tantalus had a son named Pelops. In order to test whether the gods were all-knowing, Tantalus killed Pelops and served his dead son to the gods in a banquet. The gods, however, discovered the horrible deed and restored Pelops to life. Tantalus was condemned to a punishment from which we derive the word tantalize. He stood in water up to his neck. However, when he bent down to drink, the waters receded. Similarly, a branch with fruits dangled before him, but whenever he reached up to pluck a fruit, the wind wafted the fruit away. So you can see how we can easily use this word tantalize. That's how the gods were tantalizing Tantalus. Among Pelops' sons were Atreus and Thyestes. The two brothers quarreled because Thyestes seduced Atreus' wife. Atreus defeated Thyestes and drove him out, and Thyestes then sent Pleisthenes, Atreus' son whom Thyestes had brought up, to kill Atreus. Instead, however, Atreus killed Pleisthenes, not realizing he was killing his own son. When Atreus found out whom he had killed, he pretended to consent to reconciliation with Thyestes. Thereupon, Thyestes came to Atreus' house, and Atreus served a meal containing the flesh of Thyestes' children, all except one of whom Atreus had slaughtered. So he didn't slaughter Aegisthus, okay? Atreus thus repeated the sin of his grandfather Tantalus. Thyestes unknowingly ate of the flesh of his own children. But when he discovered his deed, he cursed Atreus and his entire house and fled with his surviving son, Aegisthus. Agamemnon and Menelaus were the sons of Atreus. Agamemnon married Clytemnestra and Menelaus Helen. Agamemnon and Menelaus made war against Troy. Let's put those names in there. Seeking to revenge the abduction of Helen. And in order to obtain favorable winds to sail to Troy, Agamemnon was required to sacrifice his daughter Iphigenia to the goddess Artemis. Thus, like Tantalus and Atreus before him, Agamemnon put to death his own flesh and blood. While Agamemnon was away at Troy, Aegisthus seduced Clytemnestra. The play Agamemnon begins at the point where Agamemnon, unaware of his wife's infidelity, returns victorious from Troy, citing the death of her daughter Iphigenia as justification. Clytemnestra traps Agamemnon in his bath. She and Aegisthus kill him. In the second play, called The Libation Bearers, we see how Agamemnon's son Orestes is urged by the god Apollo to revenge his father with the help of his sister Electra. Orestes kills his mother Clytemnestra as well as her lover Aegisthus. Let's go back to this then. So this is a picture of a Grecian urn where Orestes is killing Aegisthus and while his mother flees, but he eventually kills her as well. So immediately Orestes is persecuted by the avenging Furies for his matricide. And in the Eumenides, which is the last play that we'll read from Aeschylus, we read of his escape and how the curse that turned members of the family against one another is finally lifted from the house of Atreus. And this, of course, is due to the intervention of Athena. Seeking refuge from the Furies and to be purified from his sin, Orestes comes to the city of Athens and throws himself under the protection of her guardian goddess, Athena. To decide his fate, Athena convenes the first court in the history of Athens, a group of citizens. The Furies argue for Orestes' death, while Apollo defends Orestes, and the jury is unable to come to a decision since their vote results in a tie. Athena then casts the deciding vote in favor of Orestes, thus freeing him. The Furies, however, promise to avenge themselves on all of Athens. Finally, Athena manages to pacify them by promising them a special place of honor in the hearts and worship of the Athenians. And we learn later that the Furies become a special help to all Athenians. So even in this sketchy retelling, the legend contains an appalling amount of bloodshed. In each generation, the intra-family strife is renewed. Parents, children, siblings, husbands, and wives are at each other's throats. There seems to be no possible end to it until divine intervention stops the cycle of murder and revenge. Let me repeat that. There seems to be no possible end to it until divine intervention stops the cycle of murder and revenge. The curse of the house of Atreus lies precisely in the inability of the conflicts to be resolved on the human level. So, is that true today? Do our human conflicts, can they be resolved? Can our human conflicts be resolved on the human level? Probably not. Without the gods, generation after generation would have to go on killing and being killed. And of course, we would change that to be without God, right? Without God and Jesus Christ, generation after generation would have to go on killing and being killed. So, let's discuss this idea, this question: is the existence of law a good or an evil? Often in our modern times we hear that law is a force. It coerces people. And that this coercion diminishes our freedom. No doubt the fear of law and of its sanctions prevents men from doing many things which they would otherwise do. But my question is this evil? Well, Agamemnon, Clytemnestra, and Orestes live in a lawless condition. They live in anarchy. Are they better off because of this? Well, they are free to kill in the sense that there are no laws against it. On the other hand, they have no legal protection against being killed in turn. Is there a sense in which men are freer in civil society with laws than they are in a lawless condition? Think about that for a minute. It seems in any case that life in a civil society is more secure than life in an unregulated state of nature. Is that society best which has the most laws? Or is the best society halfway between the extremes of having no laws, which is anarchy, and regulating everything by laws? What's better? I look forward to discussing this with you in class.